Welcome, everyone. Kenneth Lang here with uh, George Pace. And George and I, we have had many conversations over time about different things. I met George at the Breakfast Club, which is a group in New Jersey, and he is my go-to expert on AI. And I'm really looking forward to talking to him today because what actually happened, and a lot of us are chatting about this on LinkedIn right now, is the fact that the comments and the notifications and like are now also being driven by AI. There was a whole change with the algorithm, and I'm sure it's all related to this. So, um, George, definitely take it away. We're going to make this presentation available later on too, but I want you to feel like you want to cooperate as well, and just take it from there. And George is going to be going through some of the presentation, but we definitely want to have a lot of engagement. So go ahead, George.
Oh, yeah. So, hello, everyone. And Ken, thanks for having me back. So, for those that don't know, and Ken's going to put the link in the chat, I guess. I'll tell you a quick funny story. Back in March, I guess Ken had reached out to me and said, "Hey, George, you want to talk about GPT?" Hearing a lot of questions about it. I said, "Sure, why not?" So, we talked, and that led to actually someone in Chicago to show you the power of these video networks, as it were. Someone in Chicago saw me, and I actually ended up doing a presentation, which was 20 slides in 20 minutes, which, if you haven't seen that, it's on my YouTube channel. I'll give you the link later. And then a few weeks after that, Ken's like, "George, you want to come back again?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Why not?" So basically, when we were thinking about this, there was a comment, and Ken does what's that? Lions and tigers and bears, oh my resume thing.
Right? Yeah.
And this was about 4 weeks ago. And someone had asked a question about, was it okay? I don't remember the exact question, but was it okay to use Chat GPT for a cover letter? That was the start of it. And all of a sudden, my brain was like, wait a minute. Now I know what I'm going to talk about when I sit with Ken. So, what happened over the course of, I don't know, 4 or 5 weeks? This particular 8-page PDF, and I guess LinkedIn used to call it a carousel. That's how I call it. I put up on my profile, so it's available in a multitude of places. And what I wanted to do was kind of go through this because I think it's thematic, and I'm a visual person, and it's really the first visual I've seen in this space that I think gives people an understanding of the entire space rather than some standalone activities. So if I go through this,
Sure.
first page of the cover, yay. Second page really just talked about the it's a setup. AI is going to be used more and more. What a surprise. Um, until now, it's really been more employer based because the platforms have been big, the volume has been big. And what we're starting to see now is the push to the individual side. And what I want you to take away from this is, I'm going to get right to the diagram. This is an ecosystem. There is no single bullet, there is no magical bullet, but rather it is this ecosystem that you need to operate in. And the way I broke this particular diagram up, there's 4 sections. Section number 1, what should a job applicant be thinking about? That's the topmost box. The bottommost box was really, what is the hiring company using, or what's the hiring company leveraging? And then in between these two is what I call the job interaction zone. And it's where these job descriptions kind of hit the road and match up with these submissions. And then if you look off to the left, this was a late addition. This whole AI hiring landscape and regulations, because we're seeing regulations being applied to the space slowly, but they're being applied. And one of the questions that had come up earlier today, I saw Ken. Ken had posted the question about all of this quote unquote data that LinkedIn was using from an AI perspective. And the way I'd like you to look at this particular top box is that is your data profile, if nothing else. Realize that that data profile is going to encompass everything about you, your resume, your online conversations, your online artifacts, your digital footprint, however you want to word that. So when we come all the way down and we start looking at these applicant tracking systems and these new third-party sites, they are going to be looking to aggregate more information rather than less. So I was having this conversation just the other day of, well, should I really be worried about how do I quote unquote beat the ATS? And to me, That's maybe a small part of this, because the ATS, we're going into a world where these tools are going to know more and more about you. So it's going to be more of a keyword battle and more of an artifact battle than it is the application submission battle. So that was this particular diagram. After that, what I did, oh, by the way, the little key here, those things that were in yellow, and this is an estimate, right? I could be wrong on one or two things. This is where traditional AI and machine learning is being applied. GPT was in the blue. The blue and the white was half human, half GPT, and then everything that was white was pure human. So that just gives you a sense as to what this ecosystem looks like and is evolving to. There were two additional pages to this. It basically took a lot of these boxes, or each one of these boxes, and it provided what your goal should be for each one of those boxes and how you go about achieving that goal. So that was from the applicant perspective. Page 5 talked about the company platforms, and it would be impossible for any job seeker to understand specifically what each one of those platforms does. Rather, how do you begin preparing? So for a video interview, a technical assessment, a cultural fit, what are the types of tools that exist? And then the last two pages, really talked about links that I have found to begin giving you a taste for everything I had presented up till that point. All of these are live links. I know I made a mistake in one spot, but speech coaches, GPT prompts, job interviews. This is the one I missed, Mr. Simon. I have to fix that. Improving your communication skills. All of this is going to be critical. These are not even optional anymore. These are going to be critical. And then the last page of links really talked about what's happening from a company perspective. So, for example, what are the hiring rules that are taking place? What are the cheat sheets that HR is using internally? What do you need to know about these video assessment interviews? And then even down at the bottom, this whole matching a candidate to the underlying job description. And then I finished with my webinar and all of my other information. So that's really the starting point that I thought would be good conversation for today.
Sure. So I think it's important for people to understand that everything that is AI driven, whether it's ChatGPT or Bard or whatever it is around us. And I think one of the things that we all talk about in our space is using it as a reference point. There's so many great tools out there, whether it's asking interview questions or writing a LinkedIn profile or something like that. But there are aspects to all of this AI that we still have to understand. I was actually posting about this today. There's a guy, Richard Vanderblom, who is probably the master of the algorithm there and and he talks about how a lot of things are coming, LinkedIn building in its AI, which impacts everything we do and all the suggestions it makes. And I think the more we know about it, the better. So I would love to get some thoughts from people here as to what they think. What do you think as you're looking at job specs, as you're going on interviews? Are you comfortable with AI? Is it something that you understand? Because the more you know, the better, and you can't leave it. But at the same time, there are things AI cannot do. Wouldn't you agree, George? Like AI is not going to be able to go to speak to your tone. And I think there's a certain worry that AI is going to go too far. Wouldn't you agree?
It's like any technology. There's a pendulum that swings, and it swings all the way to the right, and then it swings all the way to the left, and it's trying to find the middle. What I would say is this: realize that this will become a much more data-driven process than it's ever been. We see things with it today, such as keyword matching, but if you really think about it, I expect to see a layer of tooling that comes on top of this that begins packaging you in unique and different ways. The takeaway is, remember, AI loves data, whether it's building the model or analyzing whatever data is put in front of it. So to me, we're going to see more of this, not less. And is some of it going to be quote unquote unfair? I mean, I think one of the challenges on the video interview, if you don't know how to act and body language on an interview, that could just be against, that's here today anyway.
Right. I think for me also, it's also how often are these different interfaces updated? So let's say I'm making changes to my LinkedIn profile. Let's say I put a new resume out on a job board. Is this in real time, or is it something gets refreshed maybe every week or every month? Or
well, the models themselves, models take time to update for a lot of reasons. How you build them, how you feed them, how you test them, how you deploy them, that takes time.
Right.
However, they are ravenous of scanning the internet to find data about you. So worry more about your digital footprint than you really are about the tools. The tools themselves, by their nature, are going to move a little bit slower. Now, some of those tools, though, were all SaaS-based, so they can move more rapidly than they had in times past.
Mm-hmm.
But, this is going to become a data game. It really is. For those listening, I would tell you that is how I would start thinking about this, is it's a data game. And what's the correct amount of data for you to put out?
So I get the feeling that a lot of companies now, if they're looking to hire for a position, they can almost use a ChatGPT or an AI interface to help them build out the requirements based on their specific needs.
Yep.
And then that in turn may help them find the right candidates based on the fact that that candidate has those skills based on what they're looking for. Is that?
I'm going to word it differently.
Okay.
So, and again, this is kind of George dreaming, so bear with me.
Sure.
So if you think about requirements today, here's a surprise. Requirements are a bunch of words, right? Duh. And then you could try and take those words and match it against a resume that has those keywords and find what your match is.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. What if I blog frequently? What if I have my own YouTube channel and did videos? What if I'm on LinkedIn and providing commentary on topics?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you think about that, that's a level of data that can begin to get categorized. What was that person talking about? What was the topic? What was the insight? So all of a sudden, now you've got this job description with keywords. One match could be something as simplistic as a resume having the keywords. But now if they start using a digital footprint to extract this extra data on you, that could be a way for you to get kicked out of an ATS because you're missing this new space. So it wouldn't surprise me to watch these tools evolve to start looking at you as a data-driven creature, and how does that help us better identify those potential skills.
So Christine brings up a question: with all the tools and options, are the bigger companies mostly taking advantage of it, or is it smaller companies, or is it a special industry sector? I mean, like anything else. I mean, because I don't know what the path is to entry for something like that. There's been your specific experience that goes in one way.
Boy, kick this Christine person off. Get rid of her. I would say, for a lot of reasons, I would think the bigger companies are leveraging these platforms first. I don't know if the smaller companies have the time, the wherewithal, what's the old expression? A fool with a tool is still a fool, or something like that.
Right.
So I'm not personally in the space looking at these tools. Like, I don't know them at that level. Right. So I can imagine that you're going to see companies with a little deeper pockets are leveraging these more effectively, and, smaller companies, pick and choose those pieces. But some of this is probably going to become more ubiquitous. It's just where and how. Again, right, they're most companies, well, not most companies, but the big boys are trying to democratize AI. That's been their mission for the past, 7 years now. So there will be tools out. They might not be the powerful, like a Workday. Let's say Workday's at the top of the heap. Well, they may not be Workday-ish, but they might be good enough for that particular scenario.
I mean, I'm gonna look at it a different way. I can see AI tools being the ones to send out rejection letters, and based on
they could be doing that today.
What?
They could be doing that today.
No, but they can do that based on very specific things. I mean, I hate the fact that the human is getting out of this in some ways, because there's some quantifiable things or non-quantifiable things you have in your background that are not going to measure any tool.
Well, Well, and this gets us back to networking 101, Ken, right? This
Right.
is, you're still networking is going to become more important rather than less important. But again, to me, in this day and age of rapidly changing skills, and again, I'll use myself as an example all day long. For those that follow me on LinkedIn, I've been heads down on AI for some time. I've been really focused on GPT for the past close to 12 months now. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, you will see my posts. You'll see I've been putting together a history. What do I think about it? What do I see? What did I learn? Where do I think it's going? If I get to an interview process or I get to a network process, I now have a digital footprint that I'm building off of.
I want to stop right now.
Yeah.
We're asking about the slides from presentation. George did start out with some slides. I will get the slides together. I will post it with the clickable links afterward,
Yep.
because there's a lot of information here that you're going to probably have to, go back and review. I think the
Yep.
biggest challenge with AI, with all of us, is we are learning as much as we can, but it's a moving target. Although I think that the biggest challenge is knowing that what is out there now is going to change 2 and 3 times. We've talked about this, George, from a technology standpoint. It's going to be changing so quickly that even what we're talking about now may not be relevant in 6 months.
Possibly. Remember, there's two schools of thought. Well, multiple schools of thought, but on this particular one, the old school of thought was, can you be a fast follower? And here's my personal belief on being a fast follower. You miss all of the foundational education and muscle memory of that trial and error that got you to becoming, like, in other words, the companies that did the trial and error were able to get an insight and a depth that the fast follower can't get and will never get. So there's a lot of things that I'm learning and I continue to learn that as I see the changes, it helps fill in some blanks and makes me, and one of my jokes is, am I whiteboardable? Can I get to the board and really, whiteboard it out? I think, and again, my missive, 30 minutes a day, you can't wait. If you wait, it's a bad thing. So yeah, is it going to change? Yes, that's the nature of technology. Should you wait for it to be finished? Well, you're going to be waiting forever then, because it's never going to be finished. So I jump in the water. I mean, that's the short of it.
So the first question is some of the pros and cons of AI, just in a very general way. What do you think?
Well, I'll start with what I believe it to be, and I think the easiest way to talk to people about it, if we go back to the days of RPA, where that was automating keystrokes, you did that for a number of reasons, right? You had legacy systems you weren't moving. You had people that were moving in and out of the job. You wanted to automate that to get information out. Okay, fine. We really didn't have an automation tool that could do some of what GPT is doing today, or GPT is doing today. So in many ways, I look at this as a new form of automation for tasks that probably should be automated in the first place. So that's, to me, that's kind of the pro, right? The con is, I think all of this stuff's way overhyped. It's not some magic bullet. It's not sentient. It's not all knowing and all powerful. However, again, if I keep going back to pro and con, I think one of the challenges is that, people think this is the magic Staples easy button where, you put this in, you press the button and it's done. No. You're still going to need a human touch. It's that everyone is overplaying, what do we call it? The trough of disillusionment. It's coming. I think this is getting more hype than it should. And I think some people, unfortunately, buy into that hype.
Well, I remember when I was at Bed Bath many years ago, we were working on something called the chat box, which I guess is now all over the place, where you would have questions, you'd have responses to questions that people ask. And we would have to develop what the script was for all the questions that were there. And it had to be done, programmed in, so that the chat knew how to answer it. And that was a very primitive version of what's there now. You can chat with someone on customer service. Maybe it's not as successful as it could be in person, but there's a lot of that is automated. And that kind of brings me to a question from Dr. Scott. 40% of workforce will have to reskill 80% of those executives expect AI to augment roles rather than replace them. So, again, I don't know if you agree or not, but what do you
I,
project to be the most valuable skills, and how would you
ooh,
suggest people get them?
I know. I'll tell you what my top two are that I
Sure.
see in such short supply. Critical thinking, number one, and creativity. 1, 2, 2, 1. Those are the top two, because a lot of what I saw through my career where people would have a job and they would basically put the blinders on, in a sense, kind of put their head down, and they did their job. Um, that doesn't lead to learning. That doesn't lead to a lot of different things. I'll just say that. So this idea that you're going to have that same job or you're going to have that same skill. And again, I gave this presentation, geez, 2014ish, I guess, 15ish, where I said the single worst thing that happens to an individual is they stop going to school, because two things happen: you get free time and you get disposable income. And at no point in time did anyone ever say, hey, you need to spend 30 minutes a day continuing to learn. People went on with their lives and did whatever it was that they wanted to do. So to me, it's, skills are always a moving target. The skills I have today are not the same skills I had. Well, some are the same, but I have skills I built over even the past 5 years that are just different. So
I think for me also, it's really, I've actually picked up other skills that I wasn't as good at before, just by and there's, we call them soft skills, and I'm not sure that's even the best terminology, but you're always learning. And you know, Adam had this question: if you're a job seeker, what's the best use of AI right now? The thing you should be doing that you probably aren't. So
I get back. Well, go let me share my let me can
share your
put my slide
screen.
back up. Yeah, share my screen again.
Okay, we're there.
Okay. So for those that haven't seen it, this is what's in the toolbox. And what I would be telling you is you need to really think of this as your data footprint or your digital footprint. Don't get into, and again, we have to separate this into pieces. I get it. If you're in transition, you're trying to get a job, put that aside for a minute. I think if you're preparing yourself or you're trying to acclimate yourself to what this new normal is going to be, you really need to be looking holistically at your value prop being one, and what does your digital footprint look like? And the ability to show people that you can think about what this does. Again, I'll use me as the example. If somebody wants to see how I communicate, you can go to my YouTube channel. You can go to my Substack and read my blogs. You can go to LinkedIn and read my posts. You can attend my weekly webinars. I have a multitude of ways that can demonstrate certain skill sets. To me, that is data that's going to get picked up and processed at some point in time if it's not already. So what I would suggest is that in this world where they want skills and they want proficiency in those skills, the real question becomes, how do you what is the best mechanism for you to get that out? And that starts with your digital footprint. And to me, everything flows from that.
I think there's a tendency for a lot of people out there to be afraid or not sure about posting, whether it's being concerned about privacy or anything else. But
Well,
everything out there. Did you want to say something, George?
yeah, I mean, again, think about these things for a second. What does privacy mean? I'm saying that kind of tongue in cheek.
Right.
Go look. If anybody has a problem with privacy, go look at my LinkedIn postings. Go to my YouTube channel. What am I giving up that's private? Like I'm talking about my skills. I'm talking about the space that I'm in. I'm talking about where it's going. I'm focused on the business problems. I'm focusing on how we might go about solving those business problems. But there's no real privacy issue here, right? I'm not sharing anything else other than the focus on the skill. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's one of the things, and I've heard that before. It's not a bad question, but the only thing you have to worry about is what you decide to share. And guess what? That's up to you in terms of what you want to share. So, I would say jump in. I've given it, honestly, Ken, I've given this advice to people probably since 2014, and it's amazing how few people take me up on they think it's a great idea, but think of yourself. So I'm going to get back to that second question: what should job seekers, be focused on? realize that when you're in that chair being interviewed, those companies are up against the same challenges of it's too fast, it's too much to know. How do we solve this problem? How do we make sure we can stay ahead of our competition? If you can show up during that interview and actually say, look, I've been looking at this. Here's the threats. Here's what I'm thinking about. Here's how I'm getting myself ready. You've immediately differentiated yourself from the pack. And if somebody were to ask me, George, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? I could say, talked about that on my LinkedIn feed, talked about that on my YouTube channel. I'm not just making it up. I've actually bought into it whole hog. So to me, it's kind of two things. Start thinking about your digital footprint is A. B, think about your space, whatever it is that you do, accountant, auditor, architect, I don't really care what it is. What are the challenges that are impacting that space?
Mm-hmm.
Because when you go to an interview, you might want to tell that company, yeah, I see what you're probably up against, and here's the things I'm doing that I could help you get past this.
I think even going back to your point about learning, everyone should be learning something every day. And learning does not mean you're necessarily reading a book or anything else. It could be going online. It could be educating yourself, because you're always going to pick up something. And I think that's a mindset thing. I mean, and learning has nothing to do just with getting a job. It's just it's recognizing what's out there. And I think that's so important.
Yep. And I can tell you, again, I brought this up in loads of previous presentations. I have skills that are 25 years old, 30 years old. I'm still leveraging them slightly differently. They didn't go away. Now, are there a couple skills? Yeah, I actually did know how to create a punch card once. That's a skill that's not valid anymore. Okay, fine.
Me too.
Okay.
JCL and all that mainframe.
JCL and all that stuff, right? But there are certain things, like very early in my career, I learned how to look at new technologies. That whole framework applies. Nothing's changed. The speed has, but nothing's changed. And again, that gets back to that narrative of, as a job seeker, what do you do? Realize, the interview is about the company, right? What problem are they up against? They're up against what everybody's up against today, which is speed, rapid pace of change, lack of skills. The second you can begin to provide that knowledge and say, hey, I'm in X, whatever field you're in. Here's how I see AI impacting that field, and here's how I'm preparing myself to align with those changes and how I can help you. There's not many candidates that are being interviewed that will say that. And
I also think nowadays, with everything going so fast, sometimes it's just as important to slow down. You're going by what AI says, you're going by what people think. Sometimes you have to take a step back and say, is this really what we want to do? And maybe you're going to go based on past experience, because I know in my case, I've been in enough meetings over time, and it's like, wait a minute, why are we talking about this? Let's really make sure. Forget that it may be the right thing to do technically, but it may not be the right thing to do. And sometimes you have to be able to get that human interaction, whether it's based on your past experiences or whatever.
We're back to the pendulum, though, right?
Okay.
I get that. What's another question? Any good questions? So good questions.
Well, no, I'm just looking. Thinking is just as important as breathing.
Sometimes.
Well, but I think the most important thing to understand is that, and we talk about this, lions and tigers are as we talk about this all the time. AI, ChatGPT, Bard, whatever it is great from a research standpoint. I use it all the time at Lee Hecht Harrison, but I don't use it to do my work. I use it for background information, because the information is there. It's just but it's another iteration of Google. I used to Google stuff. Now I'm just going to go to an AI tool to do it. And it's just another iteration of that. So from a job search perspective, yeah, if you need to have a branding statement written, you can get a branding statement written there in very generic ways. But now take that branding statement and make it your own. Don't just do a cut and paste.
If we go back to the screen, Ken, your check's going to be in the mail. If you look on the left-hand side here for key insights, whoops. Can I move over here? Hold on a second.
Yep.
Right there. Personalization of content will be a critical differentiator. Realize, right, if we were to go through this factually, I think it was the New York Times just this past week, I forget, I did it on my webinar, I forget who it was. that they made a statement that they're not going to allow GPT to generate articles that get published. And that follows the lawyer that used GPT to create a response to a brief that made up law as it went along. So we're still a ways away from this thing. You know, it's this whole concept of trust, right?
Right.
You got to be able to trust these things. And here's the secret: GPT is a sophisticated look-ahead engine. That's all it is. There's no smarts. So, you know, again, this whole doom and gloom about it's going to replace things. Yes, there will be people that knee-jerk this and say, "Oh, we're going to get rid of this or get rid of that." The pendulum will swing back once they get the, you know, their hands slapped once or twice because it was incorrect information. And remember, you know, the companies that I talk to, this is about reputational risk as well. You know, this just isn't, hey, this sounds like a great idea, let's go do it. You'll hear companies talk about human in the middle, where they have the AI or whatever it is that's generating that content. It still needs to go through a human before it can go out the front door. And that's reasonable, right? It's a tool.
I keep seeing all these articles about regulating this and about making sure that it's accurate, and there's a whole different industry that'll come out of this. I liken a lot of this now to when the internet first came out. And I remember
I'm sorry, what, Ken?
when the internet first launched, I remember a time, like some of us do, when there was no way to search for stuff online, and you would start, and then it became an oh my god thing, and then it became different iterations. You know, you'd have to and I'm going to date myself again. You'd have the road maps that you get at a gas station. Well, then you can go to MapQuest. Now you can just go to your phone to get directions.
Ken, I was in a meeting. I won't
Yes.
mention where you can figure it out. In 2000, 1998, that general time frame,
Right.
there was a vice president in a meeting that says, we will never expose our application to the internet. I was in that meeting. And I was like, ooh, that's interesting. Want to see how that plays out. But I was in those meetings.
And I think, and Dominic brings this up, I actually did watch this 60 Minutes thing that Scott Pelley did about all of this. It is, if you don't understand it, it can be very frightening and scary. But once you start to understand it, it does get better. It's not to say there isn't stuff to worry about.
Well, change is hard. I mean, we get back to some basic realities. Change is tough. So, you know, here's another one. Let me get this up, Ken.
Sure. Okay.
So, you know, for those that have not seen my 20 slides and 20-minute presentation, it's up on my YouTube channel. And, you know, this is as close to making it as simplistic as I can to understanding this GPT space. But this thing we keep talking about, and I'm just take a couple minutes to explain this very quickly, and we'll start anywhere. But on the left, all these engagement sources, this is all the different ways that GPT and ChatGPT are going to be consumed. Chatbots, applications, digital assistants, the whole 9 yards, humans, whatever it is. The secret and the simplicity of this model is in this thing called the user query and the query response. When you ask a question, all it does is it creates a mathematical vector. It knows how to take words, the positioning of the words, the meaning of the words, and it creates a mathematical vector. That jumps all the way over here to the actual model that's chock full of these vectors. And it does basic cosine similarities between your vectorized query and the vectorized data, says, oh boy, all this stuff looks close, spits it back, and it reassembles it into an answer. Now, that model, if we look up top, is built. We don't know how it's built. What were the data sources? Was it free of bias? Did anyone validate the data? Does it align with regulations? We don't know about this stuff yet. So if you look at this and you start really digging into some of the detail, this is just a sophisticated look-ahead engine at the end of the day. So again, this is why when people give me the doom and gloom, I'm like, you got to bring it back a little bit, because when you see these constituent parts and pieces, you get an understanding of what it is and what it isn't.
And I think you bring up a good point. It's the not knowing part. And I think we have AI tools in our all the time, you know, in our places where we do things, when we speak into our phones, when we use Google. Um, I think it's so important. So, Andrew, are you saying that it corrects itself?
It has no idea what. So, Andrew, I'll give you an interesting one. So, the problem is that this thing is where hallucination comes in, right? What happens is it's a sophisticated look ahead engine based on weights. So, if it accidentally goes down the wrong path, it generates a wrong answer. Now, there are if you go out to archive, it's ARX. I can't do this here. ARIXV.org. I think that's archive. It's phonetically. It's a Cornell University. They've got all the white papers on this stuff. One of the things that they're talking about is over here where they would have, let's just say it's 3 different chatbots. And the idea is that those chatbots would argue with themselves and through that argument get to the right answer. This doesn't understand right from wrong in any sense of the imagination. It just knows how to generate stuff based on math. That's what it is.
And I think the more content that goes in, I think the better the results would be. But here's a question also: can it give you a sense of quality? These different tools.
How? No. Again, think about there's an old, again, let's go back to IT 101. There's an old acronym, GIGO, GIGO, garbage in, garbage out. And if I were to feed a bunch of, let's just go up to this generic GPT data source for a second. Let's say that I wanted to be a bad actor. And through some nefarious means, I create a data source that is completely, and everything's wrong in it. Everything. I basically copy Wikipedia and I have something that just changes everything in Wikipedia, right? Randomizes it. Well, if somebody picks that up and feeds it in, the only thing the model is going to know about is I have some information. I've tokenized it. Let me figure out where it fits. Oh, I'll adjust some weights. It has no comprehension as to whether, like if I put down, George Washington killed JFK. It has no, that doesn't know, right? It's because that's not what happens at that level of building the beast. Who is validating that information becomes important.
So Scott put in the chat here, I think the place you're referring to, which is
that's it. Thank you, Scott. That's it. That is a fantastic site, by the way. If you want to get any insights as to what's going on, go to that site and do search on LLM for large language model or GPT. Oh my God. Some of the stuff that's being worked on is interesting.
So this is kind of alluding to what you talked about before. Learning new things, growing is inevitable. A habit must be established before it can be improved upon. And it's so easy now to pick up on things to do, for sure.
Give Martina a gold star.
I will.
She gets the gold star.
So then what is the next wave? Is quality the next wave? I mean, with this, with what we do with GPT and the like?
Boy, that's a good question. But that's a good question because I can,
I mean, I guess I'll put it a different way. Whether there are some places, like when you go to Amazon, there's different types of reviews and things. Could you ever see a point where the content is reviewed or prioritized as being good or bad content, maybe? Or how do you know that everything is equal?
Well, here's again, I'm going to give you, this is like off the top of my head because I really haven't thought about this from a wave perspective. Maybe I'll talk about it from things I see happening. I think the first set of things you're going to find are a series of what I'll call bespoke LLM models. So Bloomberg has Bloomberg GPT. Microsoft has one Bio GPT. Salesforce has Einstein. So you're going to see a lot of these purpose-built large language models. I think that's going to be one wave, and we'll watch the maturation of that. That'll be one. I think another wave is going to be around this whole concept of trust. And and again, if you look at Salesforce, they have this whole trust box. I've got to learn more about how they're going to pull that magic off. But how do we learn to better trust these things so that we can use them in real life situations. I think trust is probably, and again, in this is from my 20 slides, 20-minute presentation. If I come here, this was a whole trust conversation I got into, where if you trust people, and we know people aren't necessarily reliable 100% of the time, are you going to hold chatbots to the same level as human beings? I don't know, beats me. But we have to figure this out. And you really don't see a lot of effort or people in the news talking about this trust item. I'm telling you, we've got to figure this one out in order for us to get to that next wave.
Now, do you see, I mean, Chet, I mean, what I see, I mean, I don't know. I worry about the future because I worry about the abuse of this. And about maybe there being bad players in this space. And that's where I think it's so important to make sure that it's trusted content.
Well, I'll tell you, it's funny you say that, Ken, because there's really, all right. So let's look at this from a current perspective. Let's forget about Chat GPT right now, right? There's something that's called SQL injection, where a bad actor can try and overload a form to, break a query to get information. There are people that do denial of service attacks today anyway. There's people that are doing spoofing today anyway. So the idea of bad actors is not a new thing. I think where we get into some interesting, and oh, by the way, OWASP, OWASP, they're a security consortium. They just recently came out within the past 2 months, the top 10 things to make sure you look for in a large language model. There was an injection type of I forget what it's called, top of my head, but a vulnerability around injecting into a large language model was one. But if we go back to this other diagram, where you source these from is one of the ways you mitigate that risk. Because if I'm sourcing this from Salesforce, Bloomberg, AWS, whatever it is, right? I've got a provenance. I can go back, right? I've got an authenticated source that I can talk to. I think to your point, if somebody comes up with a rogue site and builds their own chatbot, you can do that. But now we've entered in kind of a different use case, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right. So I think in more formal scenarios, I'm not so sure that the threats are any different than they are anywhere else. So.
And this is a point. The chatbots have no moral code or relational dynamics. They will never be trustworthy in a way a real person may be.
Well, there's untrustworthy people out there. Just that's the thing, right? You tend to bring people into your circle that you trust, and there's other people that what they used to call them, snake oil salesmen.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily a new thing.
Well, and it's with anything that's out there. I mean, there's the old saying, just because it's on the internet, it's true. Well, that's not the case. I mean,
well, Abe Lincoln said that, right?
Yeah, he definitely did.
Abe Lincoln said that
back in the old days.
That's a great meme, by the way.
I think the most important thing to keep in mind with all this is to be aware of it and to know that it's around. Those of us we try to embrace it. We embrace it because it's a part of what we do.
Well, and Ken, I was reading, and again, I read so many things. Even on our emails today, right? I mean, people try and spam us and through email. Now, could AI do it faster? Yeah, it could do it faster, but the same rules apply. So there's bad, the sad reality is there's bad actors out there. That's a sad reality.
So I'm looking here. There have been several instances in which people's reputations have been trashed by hallucinating AI. As we build our digital footprint, how do we ensure against that?
Great question. And let me answer that a slightly different way.
Okay.
Put that back up, Ken.
Oh,
if you can.
Sure, absolutely. Yep.
So again, there is nothing that's take Chat GPT out of it today, right? People's reputations have been trashed in a lot of different ways, right? Through their own doing. Some have inadvertently been trashed. So that, again, GPT isn't doing anything that's a net new. So your digital footprint is about you. If you're focused on what you've done and your videos and your successes, and you're focused on the problem, you're focused on the technology, the worst single thing that's going to happen is you say something that might be wrong. And I'm okay being wrong. I say it all the time. That's how I learn. Am I right 100% of the time? I'd like to think I am, but I realize that's not possible. I'm sure I've said things in my videos that's wrong somewhere. It's part of learning. It's where, and I think I know which one you're talking about in terms of people reputation. There was something that, and I forget exactly who it was, but there was a certain amount of libel that because the model hallucinated, it came up and said something about someone that wasn't true. But remember, that's not you. That model hallucinated anyway, right? So there's this rule, and that's going to get into where regulation is, right? Who would be responsible for that libel, in a sense, that they took your information and incorrectly used it or processed it. But again, your information is about you. It's very, like, in other words, you're not well, if you're making your information up, that's a different story. But if you're staying consistent with what you're doing and what you're focused on, you're going to get a nice lawsuit against those things that use it inappropriately. I'll say it that way.
So this brings up again, how can we maximize this collaboration of AI and human intelligence so we can manage projects and work more efficiently, which is kind of like the big $64,000 question a lot of us are asking.
Well, so let's do it this way. I'm gonna Hector, I'm going to change your question a little bit. I need to have the 14, maybe the 13-year-old Hector, and I'm going to give you the keys to a car and say, Hector, I want you to go drive to the store. Well, there's a whole bunch of stuff that didn't happen, right? You didn't have the experience yet. You don't necessarily know how to operate a car. There's other people that do know how to operate a car, but there's this whole ecosystem that, when I tell you this is in the first inning, I think we're still even in the top of the first, to be honest with you. I think that a lot of this is to be answered. Where I get back to, and if you look at, again, this particular diagram here, it starts with the fundamentals. What can it do? What are you trying to accomplish? Again, if you notice a lot of the talk about GPT in general, how often do you see someone say, what business problem is it solving? You rarely see that in conversation. Talk about all the wonderful things it can do. What's the business problem it's solving? And then what's the risk profile of that solution? You don't hear anybody talk about this. So, I mean, I could go on for hours on that question, Hector, because it touches so many different pieces and parts. Let's go up to this, the IT project for a second. What does a large language model even look like in a normal DevOps space? I don't know. Beats the hell out of me. How do you test it? What does testing mean? What happens when you test version 1.0 of the model and now you're up to version 2.0 of the model? How does testing work? I don't know. But these, I think, it's a good question, though. But I think we're so early in this that, to me, I get back to basics. What are the fundamentals, the foundations? How do we mitigate risk so that when we look at these things, we're not we're doing it in a reasonable fashion? Say it that way.
So, Dr. Scott, opinions on jailbreaks and do anything now to break out of the system's controls?
Yeah, this is, yeah.
You want a question? You want a question?
Yeah. Actually, to be honest with you, Dr. Scott, I'm fine with this, actually, because if you think about cybersecurity and the early days of cyber hacks, it was all of those hacks that exposed the holes that the companies were able to fix. So, there's always going to be a bad actor trying to do and do things to get past these, and there was another one. I got to go back. I forgot what the hell the name was. It wasn't hallucination. It was something else, where people that are trying to break a model, I actually look as a positive, because they find what the hole is and they get to fix the hole. So again, because we're in the early days, I'm actually fine with it.
Well, okay. Oh, the joke. How old is old enough to not have to worry about this whole thing?
Well, again, I've been through so many of these changes. To me, I'm a little what's the word? Desensitized to this stuff. To me, it's
Well,
actually. Go ahead, Ken.
no, go ahead. You go.
No, I was going to say I saw something interesting. I think it was the CEO of Microsoft just said it, and I've been saying this for a while, so I think he copied off me. Most of what's happening today is because of the last 20 years. If we didn't have cloud, you wouldn't have AI. If we didn't have deep learning, we wouldn't have AI. If we didn't have big data, we wouldn't have AI. If we didn't have companies investing in this over the past 15 years, we wouldn't have AI. So what we've really witnessed over the past 20 years is a foundation that's been built that now we're actually reaping the rewards off of that. Now, mind you, it introduces its own challenges. I get it. But this has been, I followed this the entire time. Open source played a role in all of this. So there's so many factors that got us here that if you missed a couple of them, it was okay back in the day. But what that did was it formed a pretty powerful foundation that all of this stuff is being built off of.
Well, I want to end this so that people can leave for 2:00 close. George, would you be willing to come back some other time?
Sure.
So why don't you,
Why
if
not?
you're interested in coming back, why don't you post in the chat some of the questions, some of the things you have that you would like George and I to answer in the future? We kind of had a conversation just based on a thought, but we would love to get your feedback as well. And I'm definitely going to share the PowerPoint. I think it's so important to stay on top of this. And I want to thank you very much, George, for coming. We've talked for a while about doing this as an ongoing thing, and maybe we will. I think a lot depends on what the content is.
So real quick in the chat, thumbs up, thumbs down, good stuff.
All right, go ahead.
Interesting.
Thumbs up, thumbs down, like, don't like.
Like, don't like, give me something. Give me something.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
George. And then wait, and let me do my cheap plug.
Of course.
Where's
I mean, like I said, there's a delay of 45 seconds or so you may not hear everything right away.
Where am I here? I don't know where. Oh, I played there. Okay. My cheap plug. It's not my cheap plug. Where's my cheap plug?
Okay.
There's my cheap plug. There's my cheap plug. So again, my streaming channels, it's every Sunday morning, 9 a.m. So it's either notice keep pace. What a great tagline, right?
Yes,
I do Twitch, LinkedIn. If you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll get the notification. On Twitter, my repository, which I'm a little behind on, is youtube.com/keep pace. If you look at Substack, keeppace.substack.com, you'll see the blog that contains the 8-page job search thing, and that's how you get a hold of me.
And I will share the presentation. I have the original presentation, first of all, so I'm going to go through it and make sure the links and everything works. Just because I know everyone wants it and it's a lot to digest, so I definitely want to make sure that it's viewable and available. So I want to thank you guys very much for attending. A lot of great comments here. We didn't get to all of them, and I'll get back to them as many as I can later on. Have a great day. George, thank you so much, and we'll see you soon, and we'll see everyone else later on.
Toodles.
Toodles.